At 7:28 in the morning, a ship full of families rolled over in the middle of Chicago. It was not at sea. It was not in a storm. The SS Eastland was still tied to the dock, only a few steps from shore. Within minutes, 844 people were dead. The warnings were there. The Eastland disaster happened on July 24, 1915, on the Chicago River between the Clark and LaSalle Street bridges. The ship had been chartered for a Western Electric Company picnic. Thousands of workers from the Hawthorne Works in Cicero, Illinois, were supposed to cross Lake Michigan to Michigan City, Indiana, for a day of music, food, and relief from factory life. The Eastland looked like an ordinary passenger steamer. But her danger was not hidden in one broken part. It was spread through her entire history, a design that chased speed, repeated stability problems, added weight high above the waterline, a legal system reacting to Titanic, and a business decision to keep carrying a huge crowd. Eastland was built in 1903 for Great Lakes service. Almost immediately, she earned a reputation that should have followed her like a warning label. She could be fast, but she was tender, meaning she was prone to roll. In 1904, after leaving South Haven with about 3,000 passengers, she nearly capsized. Her passenger capacity was reduced. Cabins were removed. Lifeboats were added. Repairs were made. But the pattern did not end. In 1906, another listing incident brought complaints. In 1912, while loading passengers in Cleveland, Eastland reportedly listed about 25 degrees. Imagine standing on a ship before departure and feeling the deck tilt enough that normal movement becomes a calculation. That was not a mystery after the fact. It was behavior observed years before the disaster. The question was larger than any single change: what did all of this do to the ship's margin of stability? A ship needs a restoring force. When weight shifts or passengers crowd to one side, the vessel must want to come back. If too much weight sits too high, the ship can lose the ability to recover. Eastland had already shown that weakness. Then came a law meant to prevent another tragedy. After Titanic sank in 1912, the United States passed the Seamen's Act. Passenger vessels were required to carry more lifeboats and life-saving equipment. The purpose was obvious and humane: if a ship sank, people needed seats. But on Eastland, safety equipment became another source of risk. More lifeboats, rafts, and gear meant more weight high on a vessel already known for instability. There was a choice. Eastland's owners could reduce passenger capacity or carry the additional gear and keep the higher license. They chose the path that allowed more passengers. So the ship prepared for the picnic with legal papers in order, life-saving equipment aboard, and a history of leaning that had never been fully cured. On the morning of July 24, boarding began around 6:30. The river was calm. The ship was not moving. Passengers came aboard in large numbers and spread through the decks, cabins, and enclosed spaces. Some went below to get out of the damp morning air. As the load increased, Eastland began to list. At first, it could be explained away. Ships rock. Crowds shift. People laugh at a strange tilt until it feels wrong. Crew members tried to correct the list with ballast water. Ballast is supposed to help control a ship's trim and stability. But ballast is not magic. If it is handled badly, or if the ship is already near the edge, it can worsen the movement instead of saving the vessel. By about 7:10, Eastland was near capacity. The ship leaned to port, away from the wharf. Some passengers noticed. Others were trapped by routine. A picnic ship was supposed to leave the dock, not become a disaster at it. At 7:28, Eastland lurched. The roll was sudden and final. The vessel went over onto her port side and settled in the Chicago River, where the water was only about 20 feet deep. That shallow depth is one of the cruelest details in the story. The ship did not vanish beneath an ocean. Half of it remained visible. The dock was close. Rescuers were nearby. But for hundreds of people inside, the ship had become a steel trap. Water rushed into cabins and companionways. Furniture broke loose. Stairways turned sideways. Doors and passages that made sense when the ship was upright became confusing, blocked, or impossible. Those on the exposed side climbed, jumped, or were pulled away by rescuers. Small boats came alongside. Workers, firefighters, police, and bystanders tried to reach people through portholes and openings. Welders and rescuers cut into the hull. The nearby tug Kenosha helped survivors escape from the overturned ship. The rescue was heroic. The failure had already happened. The death toll was 844 passengers and crew. Many victims were workers from immigrant communities tied to Western Electric. Entire families were shattered. Chicago's riverfront became a temporary disaster zone, with buildings turned into morgues and city services overwhelmed by the scale of identification and grief. What makes Eastland especially haunting is that it combined two kinds of warning. The first was technical. The ship had listed before. Her stability had been questioned by her own behavior. Added top weight changed the risk. Ballast handling mattered. Passenger concentration mattered. None of these facts required hindsight. They were visible in the record before the morning of the picnic. The second warning was cultural. After Titanic, the public wanted more visible safety. Regulators wanted lifeboats. Companies wanted compliance without losing revenue. But a safety rule aimed at one disaster can create new danger if it is applied without understanding the system it enters. Eastland shows how compliance can become a costume. The ship could meet a rule and still be unsafe. It could carry life-saving equipment and still become more dangerous because of where that equipment sat. It could be licensed and still have a history that demanded caution. After the disaster, investigations and lawsuits argued over responsibility. A grand jury indicted company officers and ship personnel, but criminal accountability did not match the scale of the loss. Courts struggled with proof, causation, and the old defense that the ship had operated for years without disaster. That argument is familiar in preventable catastrophes. It worked before. But, it worked before, is not the same as, it was safe. Sometimes a system survives because the exact combination has not arrived yet. Then one morning, the combination arrives all at once. Eastland was later raised, repaired, and sold into naval service as USS Wilmette. The physical ship had a second life. The families did not. Today, the Eastland disaster is less famous than Titanic, even though it killed more passengers than many maritime disasters that remain household names. The images are almost hard to process, a ship on its side in a city river, surrounded by buildings, as if disaster had wandered into an ordinary workday. But that is exactly why the story matters. Catastrophes do not always announce themselves with storms, explosions, or spectacular danger. Sometimes they begin as paperwork, a capacity decision, a design compromise, a previous incident filed away, a repair that treats a symptom, or a safety rule applied without asking what else it changes. The Eastland did not need to leave Chicago to become deadly. It only needed a full load, a known weakness, added weight, a shifting list, and people willing to believe that a ship still tied to the dock could not possibly be in mortal danger. The warnings were there. They were in the earlier lists, in the added top weight, in the ballast struggle, in the crowded decks, and in the quiet assumption that legal meant safe. On July 24, 1915, that assumption rolled over.